I stood there in the university auditorium, my heart pounding as hundreds of students watched me get down on one knee. The ring box trembled in my hands as I looked up at Rebecca, the girl I had loved secretly for 3 years, but instead of the tears of joy I expected, her face twisted with disgust. "Are you serious right now?" She laughed coldly, her voice echoing through the microphone she was still holding from her student council speech. "You think I would ever date someone like you, John? Look at yourself." The crowd gasped. Some pulled out phones to record my humiliation. My roommate Kaif tried to push through the crowd to reach me, but it was too late. The damage was done. "I'm sorry everyone had to witness this pathetic display," Rebecca continued, her voice dripping with contempt. "John, I'm with Samantha's brother now. He's everything you could never be: rich, successful, actually attractive." The ring box fell from my numb fingers, clattering on the stage floor. 3 years of dreaming, 3 years of working extra jobs to afford that ring, 3 years of believing she might feel something for me too, all shattered in front of 500 witnesses. But as I stood there, supposedly broken and humiliated, I caught sight of someone in the back of the auditorium, a girl with kind eyes who wasn't laughing like the others. She looked genuinely sad for me, and when our eyes met, she gave me the smallest, most encouraging smile. I didn't know it then, but that girl would change everything. Because while Rebecca thought she was destroying me that day, she was actually setting me free. And the cruel rejection that was supposed to be my lowest moment would become the first step toward the greatest love story of my life. Little did any of them know, including Rebecca herself, that in exactly 2 years, I would be standing at the altar, not as the rejected fool they remembered, but as a successful man marrying the woman of my dreams, while Rebecca watched from the audience, realizing what she had lost forever. My name is John, and before that humiliating day, I was just another struggling computer science student at Metropolitan University. I worked 3 part-time jobs, campus IT support, weekend tutoring, and night shifts at a local coffee shop, just to pay for my education and help support my widowed mother back home. Rebecca was everything I thought I wanted: student council president, top of our business administration class, and daughter of the city's most successful real estate developer. She had this way of commanding attention whenever she walked into a room, her designer clothes and confident smile making everyone else fade into the background. For 3 years, I watched her from afar, helping her with computer problems, fixing her laptop for free, even writing her some presentation slides when she was overwhelmed with her father's business commitments. I genuinely believed we had built something resembling friendship. She would text me when she needed help, sometimes even grabbing coffee with me between classes. Looking back now, I realize she was just using me as her personal tech support, but back then, every smile felt like progress, every thank you felt like hope. My best friend Kaif had warned me countless times. "John, bro, she's not into you," he would say while we studied late in our cramped dorm room. "Rich girls like her don't end up with guys like us. She's just being nice because you're useful." But I was too blind to listen. I had convinced myself that underneath her polished exterior, Rebecca was just waiting for someone to see the real her. I thought I was that someone. The proposal took me months to plan. I saved every penny from my jobs to buy her a ring that cost more than my semester tuition. I coordinated with the student activities coordinator to let me surprise her after her big presentation about the new campus development project, a presentation I had secretly helped her prepare. What I didn't know was that Samantha, Rebecca's roommate and supposed best friend, had been feeding her information about my plans for weeks. Samantha knew about the ring, knew about my savings, knew about how hard I had worked for that moment, and instead of keeping my secret, she had turned it into entertainment for their social circle. "Can you believe John actually thinks he has a chance with you?" I later found out Samantha had said to Rebecca the night before. "This is going to be so hilarious, you should totally humiliate him in front of everyone." That girl in the back of the auditorium, her name was Sarah, and she was a literature major I had never really noticed before. While everyone else was laughing or recording my rejection, she was the only person who looked genuinely upset by what was happening. After the crowd dispersed and I was left alone on that stage, she was the one who quietly walked up and handed me a tissue. "I'm sorry that happened to you," she said simply. "You didn't deserve that." I was too devastated to appreciate her kindness that day. All I could think about was getting out of there, getting back to my dorm room, and figuring out how I was going to face everyone for the rest of the semester. But Sarah didn't forget about me. Over the next few weeks, as I dealt with the aftermath of becoming the campus laughingstock, she would show up in small ways: a coffee left on my desk in the library, an encouraging note slipped into my textbook, an invitation to join her study group when I was eating lunch alone. Meanwhile, Rebecca was living her best life with her new boyfriend, Richard, Samantha's older brother, who had just graduated with an MBA and landed a high-paying job at an investment firm. They made quite the power couple, and social media was full of their expensive dinner dates and weekend trips to his family's vacation home. Kaif tried to be supportive, but even he seemed relieved that I was finally moving on from my obsession with Rebecca. "Maybe this is a blessing in disguise," he said one night as we walked back from dinner. "Now you can focus on someone who actually appreciates you." He meant Sarah, of course. Even my socially oblivious roommate could see that she was interested in me. But I was still too hurt, too focused on the rejection, to see what was right in front of me. It would take several more months before I realized that the girl who had shown me kindness in my lowest moment was also the girl who would show me what real love actually looked like. And it would be almost 2 years before I understood that Rebecca's public rejection, as cruel and humiliating as it was, had actually been the universe's way of protecting me from settling for someone who could never love me the way I deserved to be loved. The weeks following the rejection were brutal. Everywhere I went on campus, people stared, some laughed openly, others whispered behind my back. The video of Rebecca rejecting me had gone viral on social media, shared thousands of times with captions like, "When you shoot way out of your league," and "Cringe proposal fail compilation." My academic performance started suffering. I found myself skipping classes where I might run into Rebecca or her friends. The part-time jobs became my refuge. At least when I was fixing computers or serving coffee, people treated me like a normal person instead of a meme. But the worst part wasn't the public humiliation, it was the slow realization of how thoroughly I had been played. About a month after the rejection, I was working late in the computer lab when I overheard Samantha talking to some friends near the printer. "The funniest part," she was saying, "is that John actually thought Rebecca liked him. Like, she literally used to show us his texts and we would die laughing. 'Thanks for fixing my laptop, you're amazing,' and he would screenshot it and analyze every word with Kaif." My blood ran cold. They had been making fun of me for months, sharing my private messages, treating my feelings like a joke. "And the ring," another voice added. I recognized it as Marcus, Richard's friend. Samantha said he spent like 3 months' salary on it. For Rebecca. As if she doesn't have a jewelry collection worth more than his entire education. "The best part is how he still doesn't get it," Samantha continued. "Yesterday he asked me if Rebecca seemed upset about how things went down. Like, bro, she's literally celebrating. Richard took her to that new rooftop restaurant to commemorate her escape from your pathetic advances." I sat frozen in front of my computer screen, pretending to work while my world collapsed around me for the second time. Not only had Rebecca rejected me publicly, but she was actually celebrating it. They all were. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every interaction I'd had with Rebecca over the past 3 years, seeing them now through the lens of truth instead of hope, the way she would only text me when she needed something, how she never seemed genuinely interested in my life or my dreams, the way she would immediately change the subject whenever I tried to talk about anything personal. But what hurt most was realizing that I had ignored all the signs because I wanted so desperately to believe in a fantasy version of her that had never really existed. The next morning, I was at my coffee shop job when Sarah walked in. She had been coming by regularly since the proposal incident, always ordering a simple latte and leaving me encouraging notes with her tip. This time, she lingered after I handed her the drink. "John," she said quietly, "I know this isn't my place, but are you okay? You look like you haven't slept in days." I almost broke down right there in front of the espresso machine. Here was this girl who barely knew me, showing more genuine concern for my well-being than the girl I had thought I loved for 3 years. "I'm fine," I lied, but my voice cracked on the word fine. Sarah glanced around the empty coffee shop, then leaned closer to the counter. "Look, I don't know if this helps, but what Rebecca did to you was cruel and unnecessary. You deserve so much better than someone who would humiliate you for entertainment." "You heard about that?" I asked, though of course she had. Everyone on campus had heard about it. "John, everyone heard about it, but here's what I think most people missed. It took real courage to put yourself out there like that. Most guys your age would never risk that kind of vulnerability. The fact that she couldn't see that says everything about her character and nothing about yours." For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than shame about the proposal. Sarah was right, I had been brave, even if it had backfired spectacularly. Besides, Sarah continued with a small smile, anyone who celebrates hurting someone else probably wasn't worth your time anyway. After she left, I found myself thinking about her words all day. And for the first time since the rejection, I started wondering if maybe Kaif had been right. Maybe this really was a blessing in disguise. But the universe wasn't done testing me yet. The next week, I got called into the dean's office. Apparently, Richard's father, who was a major donor to the university, had complained about me harassing his son's girlfriend. Despite the fact that I hadn't spoken to Rabika since the proposal, they were considering disciplinary action. Mr. Johnson, the dean said, reviewing a file on his desk, "We've received reports that you've been making Miss Martinez uncomfortable with continued unwanted attention." I stared at him in disbelief. "Sir, I haven't even spoken to her since the proposal. I've been actively avoiding her." "The complaint suggests otherwise. Apparently you've been staring at her in the library, following her to classes, and leaving her gifts." My mind reeled. None of this was true, but I realized with growing horror that this was their next move. Having humiliated me publicly wasn't enough, now they wanted to destroy my academic future too. "Sir, I can prove this isn't true. I have timestamps from my work schedule showing I was at my jobs during most of the times they're claiming this happened, and the library has security cameras." The dean held up a hand. "We'll investigate thoroughly, of course, but in the meantime, you're to have no contact with Miss Martinez or anyone in her immediate social circle. Consider this an official warning." Walking out of that office, I felt more alone than I ever had in my life. Not only was I dealing with the embarrassment of the rejection, but now I was being painted as some kind of stalker, and the worst part was, I knew exactly who was behind it. Samantha had engineered this whole thing. The public rejection was just the opening act. Now she was systematically trying to destroy my reputation and my future. But as I walked across campus that day, something shifted inside me. The sadness and self-pity I'd been carrying began to transform into something else entirely: determination. They thought they could break me. They thought I would just disappear quietly and let them continue their little game. They were wrong. The false stalking allegations hit me harder than the public rejection ever could. At least the proposal humiliation was based on something real, my genuine feelings and misguided hope. But these lies felt like character assassination, an attempt to rewrite history and paint me as some kind of predator. I stopped eating regularly. Sleep became impossible as my mind raced through worst-case scenarios. What if they escalated the complaints? What if I got expelled in my final year? What if this followed me to job interviews after graduation? I had worked so hard to get to this point, and now it felt like everything was crumbling because I had dared to love someone who saw me as entertainment. My mother noticed the change during our weekly phone calls. "Johnny, you sound different," she said with that maternal intuition that always cut straight through my attempts to seem fine. "What's happening up there?" I couldn't tell her the truth. She had sacrificed so much to help pay for my education, working double shifts at the hospital where she was a night nurse. The last thing she needed was to worry about her son being falsely accused of harassment. "Just stressed about finals, Mom," I lied, hating how easily the deception came. "You know you can talk to me about anything, right? I may not have gone to college, but I understand people, and I can always tell when something's eating at you." The tenderness in her voice almost broke me. Here was a woman who genuinely loved me, who had never made me question my worth or second-guess her affection. The contrast with how Rabika had treated me felt sharper than ever. Kaif was more direct in his approach. "Dude, you need to fight this," he said one night after finding me staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m. "You can't just let them destroy you with lies." "What am I supposed to do?" I asked, feeling defeated. "It's my word again. It's theirs, and they have money and connections. Who's going to believe me?" "The truth has a way of coming out," Kaif insisted, "and you've got people who know the real you. I'll testify that you've been avoiding her, not stalking her. Sarah will too. She's seen how you've been handling this whole thing." Sarah. Even in my darkest moments, she continued to show up, not in grand gestures, but in small, consistent ways that meant everything. A coffee left at my usual library table, a text asking if I needed help with any assignments I might be struggling with. An invitation to join her and some friends for dinner when she noticed I was losing weight. One evening, about 2 months after the proposal disaster, I was working alone in the computer lab when she appeared beside my desk with 2 cups of hot chocolate. "Thought you might need this," she said, settling into the chair next to me. "Sarah, you don't have to keep checking on me," I said, though I was grateful for the company. "I know I'm not exactly the most fun person to be around right now." She was quiet for a moment, then said something that completely shifted my perspective. "John, do you know what I saw that day in the auditorium?" I grimaced. "A guy making a complete fool of himself?" "No, I saw someone brave enough to risk everything for love, someone who had worked 3 jobs to buy a ring for a girl he cared about, someone who put his heart on the line in front of hundreds of people." She paused, taking a sip of her hot chocolate. "And then I saw that same person handle the worst possible outcome with more dignity than the person who rejected him." "Dignity?" I laughed bitterly. "I ran away and hid for weeks. You didn't lash out, you didn't try to hurt her reputation in return, you didn't even defend yourself when she was cruel. That's not weakness, John, that's character." I stared at her, this girl who seemed to see something in me that I couldn't see in myself. "Why do you care?" I asked quietly. "You barely knew me before all this happened." Sarah smiled, and for the first time I really looked at her, not just glanced, but actually saw her. She had these warm brown eyes that seemed to hold genuine kindness, and when she smiled, it reached all the way to those eyes in a way that Rabika's never had. "Because," she said simply, "I've been watching you for longer than you think. While you were fixated on someone who didn't deserve your attention, I was seeing who you really were, the way you helped other students with their computer problems without expecting anything in return. How you always held doors and said thank you to the cafeteria workers, the fact that you work multiple jobs to support yourself and still maintain good grades." My heart started beating faster. "Sarah, I'm not telling you this to pressure you or because I expect anything," she continued quickly. "I just want you to know that there are people who see your worth, even if Rabika was too blind to recognize it." That night, I went back to my dorm room with something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. Not hope that Rabika would change her mind or that the false allegations would disappear, but hope that maybe my story wasn't over. Maybe the girl who had been showing me kindness all this time was someone worth getting to know. But first, I had to deal with the lies that were threatening my future. The next day, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to prove my innocence, expose the people who were trying to destroy me, and finally stop running from my problems. Sarah was read out. I had more character than I was giving myself credit for. It was time to start acting like it. The plan I came up with was simple but risky. I was going to document everything, gather evidence of my whereabouts during the alleged incidents, and find a way to prove that Samantha and her friends were orchestrating a campaign against me. But more importantly, I was going to stop letting other people define my worth. Rabika's rejection had revealed her character, not mine, and these false allegations were just another test of who I really was. I had spent months feeling like a victim. It was time to start fighting back. 2 weeks into my investigation, I discovered something that changed everything. While reviewing the library's security footage to prove I hadn't been stalking Rabika, I stumbled upon something far more significant than my own innocence. The campus IT coordinator, Mr. Peterson, had been surprisingly helpful with my request. "John, you're one of our most reliable student workers," he said while pulling up the digital archives. "I know you wouldn't do what they're claiming. Let's find the proof you need." As we scrolled through hours of footage, I was taking notes on my whereabouts during each alleged incident. That's when I saw it, a timestamp from 3 weeks ago showing Rebecca and Richard in a study room, but they weren't studying. Richard was handing her a thick envelope, and Rebecca was counting what looked like cash, a lot of cash. "Mr. Peterson," I said carefully, "can you enhance this footage? I think there might be something here that could help my case." What we found was explosive. The enhanced footage clearly showed Richard giving Rebecca money, and their body language suggested this wasn't the first time. More importantly, we could see Rebecca taking photos of the cash with her phone, photos that looked exactly like the evidence shots she would need for insurance fraud. But that wasn't the biggest revelation. As we continued reviewing footage from different dates, a pattern emerged. Rebecca and Richard weren't just in a relationship, they were running some kind of scam together. The footage showed them meeting with various students, always involving money changing hands, always followed by Rebecca photographing something. "John," Mr. Peterson said quietly, "I think you should take this to the dean immediately. This looks like fraud, and it's happening on university property." My hands were shaking as I copied the files to a secure drive. This was so miles bigger than false stalking allegations. Rebecca and Richard were criminals, and their treatment of me was just collateral damage in whatever scheme they were running. But before I could process this fully, my phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Emergency, meet me at the coffee shop, something's happened." I found her pacing outside the shop, her face pale with worry. "John, I don't know how to tell you this, but Samantha just posted something online about you. It's bad." She showed me her phone. Samantha had shared a long Instagram post claiming that I had escalated my harassment of Rebecca. According to her story, I had somehow obtained Rebecca's class schedule and was now showing up at her study sessions to intimidate her. The post included a blurry photo that was supposedly me lurking outside the library. "John, this is insane," Sarah said. "I know for a fact you were at work yesterday when this photo was supposedly taken. I picked up coffee from you during your shift." I stared at the post, which already had dozens of comments calling me everything from creepy to dangerous, but instead of feeling defeated, I found myself smiling. "Sarah," I said, "they just made a huge mistake." "What do you mean?" I showed her the timestamp on Samantha's photo. "This picture was supposedly taken yesterday at 3 p.m., but look at this." I pulled up my work schedule on my phone. "I was clocked in at the coffee shop from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. yesterday. You were there, Mr. Peterson was there, half the student body saw me behind that counter." Sarah's eyes widened. "They faked the evidence." "Exactly, and now I can prove they've been lying about everything." I took a deep breath. "But Sarah, there's something else, something much bigger than just lies about me." I told her about the security footage, about the money exchanges, about what looked like an organized fraud scheme. As I spoke, her expression shifted from confusion to shock to something like admiration. "John, do you realize what this means? You're not just clearing your name, you're about to expose them for what they really are." But that's when my phone rang. It was the dean's office. "Mr. Johnson, I need you to come in immediately. We've received additional complaints, and I'm afraid we're going to have to consider suspension pending a full investigation." My stomach dropped. They were escalating before I could present my evidence. "Sir, I have proof that the allegations are false. I have security footage and witness testimony that—" "Mr. Johnson, I appreciate that you want to defend yourself, but these new complaints are quite serious. Please come in within the hour." After I hung up, Sarah grabbed my arm. "John, you can't go in there without a plan. If they suspend you now, it might not matter what evidence you have later." She was right. I had one shot to turn this around, and I had to make it count. "I need to call someone," I said, thinking of the one person who might be able to help me navigate this properly. "I need a lawyer." The lawyer my mother somehow managed to afford was nothing like what I expected. Lisa Chen was a recent graduate from the state law school who specialized in student rights cases. She was barely older than me, but when she walked into that dean's office 3 days later, she commanded the room like she'd been practicing law for decades. "Dean Morrison," she said, placing a thick folder on his desk. "My client has evidence that not only proves his innocence of all harassment charges, but also reveals criminal activity being conducted on university property." The dean looked skeptical, but his expression changed quickly as Lisa began presenting the security footage. The first video showed me at work during one of the alleged stalking incidents. The second showed me in the library at a completely different location than where I was supposedly lurking. The third showed Rebecca and Richard's money exchange. Furthermore, Lisa continued, "My client has documentation proving that the harassment allegations escalated in direct correlation with his academic success. Mr. Johnson recently received notification that he's been selected for the prestigious Hamilton Tech internship, an opportunity that Richard Martinez was also competing for." I stared at her. I hadn't even told her about the internship because I'd been too focused on the harassment allegations to think it mattered. "You're suggesting this is retaliation for academic competition?" Dean Morrison asked. "I'm suggesting that the evidence speaks for itself." Lisa pulled out another document. "This is the timestamp from Samantha Rodriguez's Instagram post claiming my client was stalking Miss Martinez yesterday at 3 p.m. And this is my client's work schedule, showing he was on duty at the campus coffee shop, with dozens of witnesses who can verify his location." The dean studied the documents for several long minutes. Mr. Johnson, why didn't you present this evidence earlier? Because I was scared, I admitted, and because I was still gathering proof. I didn't want to make accusations I couldn't back up. Smart approach, Lisa said approvingly. Which brings us to the bigger issue. She opened her laptop and queued up the enhanced security footage of Rebecca and Richard's financial transactions. What you're about to see appears to be evidence of insurance fraud conducted on university property involving students who have access to sensitive academic and personal information. The footage was damning, multiple dates, multiple money exchanges, always followed by Rebecca photographing documents or items. In one particularly clear shot, she was photographing what looked like a damaged laptop while Richard held up a receipt. My client discovered this while researching his own case, Lisa explained. He brought it to my attention not to deflect from the harassment allegations, but because he felt obligated to report potential criminal activity. Dean Morrison was quiet for a long time. Mr. Johnson, I owe you an apology. These allegations against you appear to be completely fabricated. He paused. However, what you've uncovered here is extremely serious. I'll need to involve campus police and potentially federal authorities. That's when the door burst open. Rebecca stormed in, followed by a man in an expensive suit who I assumed was her father's lawyer. Dean Morrison, I demand to know why my daughter is being investigated based on the word of a stalker, the lawyer said. Actually, Lisa stood up calmly, your client is being investigated based on security footage showing potential insurance fraud. The harassment allegations against my client have been proven false. Rebecca's face went white. That's impossible. John has been harassing me for months. Everyone knows. Is it? Everyone knows what you told them, I said, speaking directly to her for the first time since the proposal. But the truth is something different. Lisa activated her laptop. Miss Martinez, can you explain these financial transactions? As the footage played, Rebecca's composure cracked completely. That's not what it looks like. It looks like fraud, Dean Morrison said grimly. Where is Mr. Richard Martinez? He needs to be part of this conversation. He's not available, Rebecca stammered. He's not available, Lisa said, consulting her notes, because according to airline records, he left for the Cayman Islands yesterday morning. Interesting timing. The room went dead silent. Rebecca's lawyer was frantically whispering to her, but she wasn't listening. She was staring at me with something I'd never seen in her eyes before, fear. John, she said suddenly, you have to understand, this isn't what you think. Richard said it was just a way to make some extra money. Insurance companies have so much money, and we weren't really hurting anyone. Miss Martinez, her lawyer snapped, don't say another word. But she wasn't stopping. The harassment thing, that was Samantha's idea. She said if we could get you in trouble, it would distract from everything else. I never wanted to hurt you, I needed the money. For what? I asked, genuinely curious. My father's business is failing, she said, tears starting to flow. He owes millions to investors, and if they don't get paid back soon, we're going to lose everything. Richard said this was the only way to raise enough cash quickly. It was surreal. The girl who had publicly humiliated me for not being wealthy enough was confessing to crimes motivated by her own family's financial desperation. So, you decided to destroy an innocent person to cover your tracks, Lisa said coldly. I'm sorry, Rebecca whispered, looking at me. John, I'm so sorry, for the proposal, for the lies, for everything. You didn't deserve any of the hard. For a moment, I felt something like sympathy for her, but then I remembered the months of hell she'd put me through, the sleepless nights, the damage to my reputation, the fear that I might lose my education. You're right, I said quietly. I didn't deserve it, but more than that, you never deserved me. Dean Morrison cleared his throat. Miss Martinez, I'm afraid you're suspended pending a full investigation. Campus police will need to speak with you immediately. As if summoned, 2 officers appeared in the doorway. Lisa had clearly coordinated this entire meeting. There's one more thing, I said as they prepared to escort Rebecca out. The internship at Hamilton Tech that Richard was competing for, I'm not taking it. Everyone stared at me. John? Lisa said carefully. Why not? I looked at Sarah, who had been quietly sitting in the corner throughout this entire confrontation. Because I've got a better offer. Sarah got into the graduate program at Stanford, and she asked if I wanted to apply for their joint computer science and literature program. Sarah's face lit up. You're really considering it? I'm not considering it, I said, smiling at her. I already applied, and I already got in. The room was quiet except for the sound of Rabika sobbing as the officers led her away. Later that evening, Sarah and I sat on the steps of the library where this whole nightmare had started months ago. I can't believe it's over, I said. It's not over, Sarah replied, taking my hand. It's just beginning. She was right. 2 weeks later, local news picked up the story. University students arrested in multi-state insurance fraud scheme was the headline. Richard had been arrested in the Cayman Islands. Samantha was expelled and faced criminal charges as an accessory. But the story that meant the most to me was smaller. Buried in the campus newspaper, student falsely accused of harassment receives full scholarship to Stanford graduate program. The scholarship had been funded by an anonymous donor who had read about my case and wanted to support students who showed integrity under pressure. 6 months later, as Sarah and I packed for our move to California, I found the ring I'd bought for Rabika, still in its box at the bottom of my desk drawer. "What are you going to do with that?" Sarah asked. I looked at it for a moment, then handed it to her. I was thinking maybe we could trade it in for something that actually fits the right person. Sarah's eyes widened. "John, are you?" "Not yet," I said, kissing her forehead. "But someday soon. When we're both ready for it to mean what it's supposed to mean." As we drove away from the campus where I'd been humiliated, then vindicated, then found real love, I realized that Rabika's rejection had been the best thing that ever happened to me. Because it had led me to Sarah, and more importantly, it had led me to myself. 2 years later. The Stanford campus was nothing like Metropolitan University. Everything was bigger, more prestigious, more competitive. But as I walked across the quad toward the computer science building, I felt more confident than I ever had in my life. The joint program was challenging, combining advanced computer science with digital humanities research, but it was exactly what I'd always dreamed of doing. Sarah was thriving in her literature PhD program, and we'd found a perfect balance between supporting each other's ambitions and building something beautiful together. I was heading to my research lab when my phone buzzed with a notification I never expected to see. A friend request on social media from Rebecca. My first instinct was to delete it immediately, but curiosity got the better of me, and I clicked on her profile to see what had become of her. The change was dramatic. Gone were the designer clothes and expensive restaurant photos. Her recent posts showed her working at what looked like a non-profit organization, helping other students navigate legal troubles. Her bio read, "Second Chances Advocate, helping others learn from my mistakes." "John, I know I have no right to contact you after everything I put you through. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve that, but I wanted you to know that the consequences of my actions taught me things I never could have learned otherwise. I've spent the last 2 years trying to make amends, not just to you, but to everyone I hurt with my choices. I saw the article about your research on ethical AI development, and I'm genuinely proud of who you've become. You were always a good person, even when I was too selfish to see it. I hope you're happy." I stared at the message for a long time. The Rabika who had publicly humiliated me would never have written something so humble, so genuinely reflective. Prison time and public disgrace had apparently changed her in ways that privilege and popularity never could. But more than that, reading her message made me realize how completely I'd moved on. There was no anger left, no satisfaction in her downfall, no lingering pain from her rejection. Just nothing. She was a character from a story I used to tell about myself, but I was living a completely different story now. I declined the friend request, but not out of spite. I just didn't need that connection anymore. "Hey stranger." Sarah appeared beside me, carrying a stack of books that probably weighed more than she did. "You look thoughtful. Good thoughtful or worried thoughtful?" "Good thoughtful," I said, putting my arm around her and helping carry some of the books. "Just reflecting on how much can change in 2 years." "Speaking of change," Sarah said with a mischievous smile, "I have some news." My heart skipped. Good news or world-changing news? Both, hopefully. She stopped walking and turned to face me. "John, I got the fellowship." I dropped the books I was carrying. "The Fulbright? Sarah, that's incredible. It's for research in Ireland, studying the influence of digital media on contemporary literature. 18 months. My excitement dimmed slightly. 18 months is a long time. "It would be," she said, her smile growing wider, if I was going alone. She pulled out an envelope from her bag. Remember how you said you were interested in the intersection of AI and creative writing? Well, Trinity College Dublin has a new program that's exactly that, and they're looking for someone with your background. I opened the envelope with shaking hands. It was an acceptance letter for a research position that would run concurrent with Sarah's fellowship. You applied for me? I asked in amazement. I applied for us, she corrected. I didn't do it because whatever adventures come next, I want them to be ours. I kissed her right there in the middle of the quad, not caring who saw us. 2 years ago, I thought love meant chasing someone who didn't want me. Now I knew it meant building something together with someone who chose me every single day. The research was going better than I could have imagined. My project on ethical AI development had caught the attention of several tech companies, and I already had job offers lined up for after graduation. But more importantly, I was doing work that mattered, work that could help prevent AI systems from perpetuating the kind of unfair biases that had nearly destroyed my academic career. Sarah's research was groundbreaking too. Her work on how social media narratives influenced modern storytelling was being cited by scholars across multiple disciplines. We were both thriving professionally, but what made me happiest was how we were thriving together. We'd rented a small apartment near Trinity College, and our routine had become wonderfully predictable. Morning coffee while discussing our respective research, long walks along the River Liffey in the evenings, weekend trips to explore the Irish countryside. It was during one of those weekend trips, standing on the cliffs of Moher watching the sunset, that I realized it was time. Sarah, I said, turning away from the breathtaking view to look at her instead. I need to ask you something. She turned toward me, wind whipping her hair across her face. What is it? I got down on one knee, pulling out a ring that was nothing like the one I'd bought for Rebecca. This one was simple, elegant, chosen specifically for Sarah's personality and style. 2.5 years ago, I made the mistake of proposing to someone who didn't love me, in front of people who didn't matter, for reasons that weren't real. I took a deep breath. Today, I want to propose to someone who chose me, just the two of us, for reasons that will last forever. Sarah's hands flew to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Sarah Chen, you've been my best friend, my partner in adventure, my inspiration, and my home. Will you marry me? Yes, she whispered, then louder, yes, absolutely yes. As I slipped the ring onto her finger, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. The public humiliation that had felt like the end of my world had actually been the beginning of my real life. The wedding was small and perfect. We held it in a garden outside Dublin, surrounded by friends from our research programs, Sarah's family, and my mother, who had flown in for her first trip outside the United States. As I waited at the altar, I felt none of the nervous energy I'd experienced during that disastrous proposal years ago. This time, I knew with absolute certainty that the woman walking toward me wanted to be there. Sarah looked radiant in a simple white dress, carrying wildflowers we'd picked that morning. When she reached me, instead of the formal ceremony we'd planned, she broke into laughter. I can't believe we're really doing this, she said. Having second thoughts? I teased. Never. Just grateful for all of it, even the parts that hurt because they led us here. The officiant, a professor from Trinity College who had become a friend to both of us, smiled at our exchange. If you're ready to begin. We exchanged vows we'd written ourselves, promising not just to love each other, but to keep choosing each other through whatever challenges came next. When we were pronounced husband and wife, the small crowd erupted in cheers. During the reception, my mother pulled me aside. Johnny, she said, I'm so proud of who you've become, not just because of your success, but because of how you handled everything that tried to break you. Thanks, Mom, but I didn't do it alone. No, she agreed, watching Sarah laugh with some of our friends. You found someone who saw what I've always seen in you. Later that evening, as Sarah and I danced to our first song as a married couple, she whispered in my ear, do you ever think about how different things would be if Rebecca had said yes that day? I considered it seriously. Sometimes, but then I remember that what we have couldn't have existed if I was still trying to force something that wasn't meant to be. No regrets? She asked. Only one, I said, spinning her around. I regret not noticing you sooner. Sarah laughed. You noticed me exactly when you were ready to. Everything happened the way it was supposed to. As we swayed to the music, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about us, I realized she was absolutely right. The rejection that had felt like my lowest point had actually been the moment my real story began. Today, Sarah and I run a successful tech consultancy that specializes in ethical AI development. We split our time between Dublin and San Francisco, working with companies to ensure their algorithms don't perpetuate discrimination or bias. It's meaningful work that grew directly out of my own experience with false accusations and systematic harassment. Every project we take on is motivated by the belief that technology should make the world more fair, not less. We have a 2-year-old daughter named Emma who has Sarah's eyes and my stubborn streak. When she's old enough, I'll tell her about the day her daddy's heart got broken in public and how that breakage created space for something better to grow. But the story I'm most excited to tell her is about her mother, the woman who saw something worth loving in a broken boy and who chose every day to help him become the man he was meant to be. Sometimes, late at night when I'm putting Emma to bed, I think about parallel universes. In one version of reality, Rabika said yes to my proposal, and I spent years in a marriage with someone who never really loved me. In another, I let her rejection destroy my confidence and never took the risks that led to my current success. But in this reality, the only one that matters, her no became the beginning of every good thing in my life. So thank you, Rabika, wherever you are, thank you for being cruel enough to set me free and selfish enough to show me what real love isn't. Because now I know what it is.